My name's Siobhan Curran, and I'm the manager of the University of New I2N. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this virtual event on the lands of the Awabakal and Warramai people, and I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you're all joining us from today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this event. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing connections and cultures to the lands and waters of Australia. You can also show your respect and awareness of the country you're joining us from by letting us know in the chat function in this live stream. We're really excited to be here, part of the amazing Spark Festival. Hopefully you've had a chance to dip in and out of the program over the last week and a half, and there's still a few more days to go. So for those of you that are new to the I2N, we're an initiative of the University of Newcastle, which really has a central aim of being a catalyst for regional transformation through enterprise skill development, new venture creation and entrepreneurship. And at the heart of I2N, we have a strategically positioned entrepreneurship centre in Newcastle CBD, which offers incubation facilities that are complemented by a series of connection events like startup stories and cohort-based programs that cover individual enterprise skill development, pre-startup development, new venture establishment and acceleration, and innovation development for existing SMEs. The great thing about the I2N is that all sectors are supported, and we really do extend beyond traditional tech-based startups to include social innovation and creative industries as well. So in just under 4 years of operation and with the support of the New South Wales Government's Boosting Business Innovation Program, the I2N has welcomed more than 4,400 innovators and entrepreneurs. And as I say, they come from a range of industries and sectors and at any stage of their journey and regardless of their affiliation with the University of Newcastle. So in that time, we've helped fuel and grow more than 70 businesses. They've raised over $6 million in funding and have fostered the creation of dozens of jobs and work integrated learning opportunities for our students. They've acquired customers, they've won awards, they've grown their teams, and they've developed products and solutions delivering real world impact, which is really what we're all about. So the I2N really is recognised as having a leading and unique capacity to act as a connector and enabler of entrepreneurship and innovation within the Hunter region and beyond. And with the skills of really experienced and skilled program developers, facilitators, amazing mentors and coaches. So if you'd like to know more, you can head to our website. It's newcastle.edu.au/I2N. So a little outline of the format of this event. We've taken a number of questions from attendees at registration for those that did register. And we'll be leading with those after our speaker provides a background on their startup journey. And then we'll open it up to any questions that have been asked via the Q&A function. So please don't be afraid to hit up that function to ask whatever questions you want answered. So one good thing about this virtual event is that I don't need to point you to the bathrooms or the fire exits. If you're at home or work, you should already know the drill, as we're all very well accustomed now to being able to deliver and enjoy these events online. So without any further ado, our guest this morning is Cheryl Gledhill. She is a talented digital innovator and self-confessed startup junkie. Cheryl has created about 100 products in more than 20 years in the mobile and digital space, working with brands like Virgin, the BBC and British Telecom. She's also the former head of product at Blue Chili, which has launched 20 new ventures every year, overall helping to build around 140 companies. And there she worked hands-on with founders to define, validate and build their solutions to product market fit. Cheryl is a passionate supporter of diversity and inclusion in tech and startups. And while at Blue Chili, she actually helped to design and deliver She Starts, Australia's only venture-backed accelerator designed to support women-led startups. More recently, Cheryl on the role as head of product at Zipco, one of Australia's fastest growing fintechs, which offers buy now, pay later offerings aside more traditional credit products, with around 4.5 million active customers. Yesterday, actually, they just announced a new tap and zip feature, which will allow Zip Pay to be used anywhere except Visa, and that will no doubt see those numbers of active users increase. Welcome, Cheryl, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us at Startup Stories today.
Oh, thanks so much, Siobhan. It's really great to see you again. So thanks so much for the intro, Siobhan. So I'm Cheryl Gledhill, as Siobhan said, worked for Zip, head of product, and we had a pretty massive launch yesterday, so everybody's still pretty excited about it. But I actually started my career a long time ago. My very first role was at Aussie Mail in Sydney. Sorry, the thing is forwarding too quickly. Oh, my slides are just not working for me this morning. Richard, if you're online, I can't get to slide one. There we go. Thank you. So I started off at Aussie Mail in 1995, and my core qualification for getting the job was I had heard of the internet, which was pretty amazing. It was probably a bonus that I was a girl as well, because it was a very male-dominated place at the time. And on day one, they gave me two things. So they gave me this textbook that was called The Whole Internet and a floppy disk with how to connect my 14.4 modem to the internet. And it's actually hilarious because this textbook had the ways that you could connect to mail, like through MIME. It was how to FTP. It was how to connect to Telnet, how to connect to news groups. And they had one chapter at the back that was called the World Wide Web. And there was like literally a white pages of websites you could get to. So really, really different time. I moved into online services, which was kind of what we called the digital area back then, although the word digital didn't really exist. And we basically created content, and we used to use the most cringy terms. Like we used to talk about surfing the web, and it was cyber this, and it was that. And it was just the most amazing place to work because everything was possible. You know, it was like, oh, we need to create a website. Cheryl, do you know how to code? Like, you'll figure it out. And coding was so easy back then. It was kind of HTML and everything was tables based. And it was something you could actually pick up in a day or two. Not make very good websites, but, you know, you could actually do it. So I had the greatest learning in that job because everything on the internet was so new. Nobody really knew what they were doing. We could all see this amazing potential. And that was where I really learned not to fear technology, that technology could be broken down into bite-sized pieces. Like you might not understand the whole thing, but you could learn this small part of it. And once you've learned that small part, you could kind of learn the next part. And that's something that's definitely stuck with me through my career. And I feel like it was just a much easier time then because, you know, technology was so much simpler. But it's definitely something I've kept with me in my career. So I left Aussie Mail kind of at the end of the 90s and went traveling, and I got to ride this amazing wave of knowing how to code, having a couple of years experience. I went to London, worked for some really amazing startups. Like at the time, they were kind of tiny, nothing startups, and just watched this amazing growth of all of these companies kind of spring out of nowhere from garages. You know, I was kind of on the internet when Google launched. And before that, it was like you had Yahoo or you had Alta Vista. And Yahoo was literally humans kind of cataloging all of these different websites. So it's just this really, really amazing time. And I actually worked for a startup with Michael Acton Smith. He ended up going on to kind of do a company called Moshi Monsters, and now he's the CEO of Calm. So again, really fertile breeding ground for entrepreneurship and working with really, really amazing, smart people. And sorry, I just advanced my slides. So I came back to Australia. The dot-com bubble burst at the time, and I kind of call these my getting experience years because a lot of the people who were hiring were banks. Like there were no more startups. Everybody had gone into kind of pulled their heads down and gone, okay, well, this internet was a bubble. I guess it's not really, you know, I can't really do a startup. But I kind of got this very great corporate grounding here. You know, I worked for a lot of the big banks. I saw how things worked. I moved from being a coder into doing product because I could kind of see it's like, I see what you're asking me to build here, but it doesn't make the most sense for me here. So managed to kind of make a move up into producing, which at the time was what we called it, and learned a lot about, you know, user-centered design and usability and research, and not just kind of building what the developers think or what the marketing team think, but actually asking your users, how are you going to use this, and observing them. So got some great experience kind of coming through that. But I was also going to places like South by Southwest, and you know, I kind of felt like some of these jobs, they were a little bit corporate, they were a little bit dull. And I kind of felt like, oh, I'm building this site for investors in my day job. And then I'd be going to Texas for South by Southwest. And at the time there were, you know, 5,000 people who were all super excited about building things and creating things. And I was like, I want to be part of that. Like what I'm doing is just not exciting me very much. I want to be part of, you know, this startup world and have these crazy ideas and go off and build them. So I had an opportunity to work with a amazing mobile designer who was based in Seattle, and he's like, "Come over here. Well, let's do this properly. Let's make a startup of it." And it was kind of the second wave. So sorry, this clicker is not working for me this morning. There we go. So I got to ride this amazing second wave. So it was kind of the internet. I got to do that for 10, 15 years, saw its growth. Then mobile happened, and I moved to Seattle right after the Apple App Store launched. And it was just like this crazy gold rush with mobile. All of these companies were like, "We need a mobile app." And the second you say, "What do you need a mobile app for?" They're like, "We just need a mobile app." And they hadn't even really thought through, the context of mobile and how their users would use it. So we were a mobile design and development agency and just got to absolutely ride this crazy wave of companies just throwing money at mobile, and they had no idea what they were doing, and they had no idea what they wanted, and they had no idea what their success metrics were. They were just like, "Shut up and take my money and give me a mobile app." So it was this amazing experience in really learning how to break things down, because all of them just wanted to kind of cram their website into a mobile app, which, as we all know, like, nobody wants that. So I got to really craft the whole process of lean startup and doing an MVP. So the one we did for ADP was amazing. So ADP do kind of payroll software and incredibly powerful. They've got 500,000 features of what you could do, and they came to us and they're like, "We want an app where you could run payroll and you can like all of these things that they wanted to do." And we were like, "This is mobile. You haven't got that big a budget. Let's start with something really simple." And we managed to break it down into MVP in that we looked at the way people were currently using the ADP software. And the biggest thing that we found was, like, there are actually users in the States who would literally clock on and clock off every day through this thing in the wall. Like, they would take a card and they would clock on when they started for the day, and they would clock off at the end of the day. And so we were like, "Okay, well, the mobile app, let's MVP it. Let's just do one thing. You can clock in and clock off." And we launched it, and their users are just like, "Oh my God, this is the most brilliant thing ever," because we just changed this really kind of tedious, horrible, anachronistic behavior into mobile. And so all of a sudden people are like, "Whoa, this potential of mobile is really, really amazing." So I feel really, really lucky. I got to kind of cut my teeth right when mobile was exploding, and kind of rightly so. That did definitely, the bubble didn't necessarily burst, but it did calm down, where it's like, okay, everybody doesn't necessarily think we need a mobile app just because we have a company. Companies are at least thinking it through a lot more about mobile context and what they actually need. All right, we're going to see if this clicker works for me today. There we go. So I came back to Australia, was super, super lucky, kind of had a couple of missteps along the way, and then I ended up at a company called Blue Chili. So Blue Chili is an accelerator incubator, and we would bring in founders at ideation stage. They're like, "I have an idea, I have a problem that I want to solve." And we would give them a product team for 6 months, and we would build out the MVP. So kind of what we did for ADP, we would look at, like, what problem are you trying to solve? What is the thing that we could build that has the most value for you? Spend 6 months teaching them how to be a CEO of a startup. So kind of building the technology, teaching them about tech, particularly in the case of She Starts, where we had a lot of women who weren't necessarily that comfortable with technology. So it's like, "No, you're actually the founder of a tech startup now. Like, you need to know all of this stuff." So kind of bringing it back to the Aussie Mail days of breaking technology down into kind of non-scary components and teaching a little bit at a time. And that was amazing, because I got to work across so many different problem spaces. It was like I got to work with disability and with kind of diversity. There was, the circular economy with garbage. There was childcare. There was, air tracking with IoT devices. It was just this really amazing way of onboarding myself onto so many different industries and problem spaces, and really see what works for startups and for founders. And the interesting learning that I had from it, and actually the little photo down the bottom, one of the Blue Chili startups, he and I actually spun off another startup with the Remarkables Accelerator, because we were just like, we both have this passion for solving the same problem. So again, this really great space. And the biggest learning out of that for me was, I'm a product person. I love product. I have always believed that, the product stands for itself and you shouldn't have to, a great product will sell itself. And I really realized actually most of startups is actually selling. It is going out there and talking and pitching and selling. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if you have a product. You could have the most basic of MVPs, but it's all about the way you tell your story and who you're telling your story to, which was, a really, really big surprise for me. So Blue Chili, we all kind of disbanded, not all of us, but the product team as of December. And I've been really, really lucky. I've kind of thought of my career in terms of these waves. So I kind of got to ride the internet wave. I got to ride the mobile wave. And now, if my slides advance, I'm kind of riding this third wave, which is the buy now, pay later space, which I think is just such an interesting place. It's kind of like the early days of mobile, the early days of the web. Oh my Lord, this clicker is just not liking me this morning. It's like we're just kind of at that space again where it's like, this stuff kind of exists, like finance exists, it's existed for, thousands of years. But we're at this really amazing point of saying, what's possible? Like, what is it our users want? How can we be a better way of providing this? How can we give a better deal to people? We know people have been being ripped off kind of by banks and finances for so many years, but how can we do this in a better way for the way people are going to be spending money in the future? So that's a very quick overview, Siobhan. I've had a lot of learnings out of that, and I know there's a ton of questions, so I'll kind of pass off back to you, and we can turn it over for questions.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. I hope everyone can hear me and that we're transitioned. Okay, yes, we have. Okay, wonderful. So yes, sorry about the clicker. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I think everyone got the gist. Just based off of what you were just saying then about the transition to Zipco, one of the questions that we actually had here was, what was it about Zipco that inspired you to take on that head of product role? This is from Matt Barry, who's one of our startup founders here at the I2N Hub at Hunter Street.
So when I first interviewed with them, like, little confession to you and like the entire internet, I kind of thought, buy now, pay later, like it doesn't really sound very interesting. I've kind of done my time in finance. And then I met with them and I was like, oh, wow, like you guys really get it. Like the founders are startup kind of background. They're all about like, how do we actually innovate? How do we change? How do we make finance better? And that to me was really interesting because it's like I've done the credit card company and I've worked for Virgin, I've worked for NAB. And it's like, the innovation you get there is like, how do we, raise our interest by a percentage point and charge more fees? And it's like, that's not very interesting to me, but this is, because this is like, okay, we know the way that we've done personal finance in the past is not working for a lot of people, but how do we make it better? And they really honestly believe in the mission. They had product market fit, and I'm just like, okay, well, where could we take this? And it had come off the back of, I saw Mark Pesce do a talk on digital currency in October at Web Directions last year. And so I started digging into like, what actually is the future of money here? Because like this whole idea of like going to an ATM and withdrawing your paycheck, like that is so antiquated. I literally haven't been to an ATM like in a year. Yeah, it's like, how is money going to change? This is about to get really fascinating. Like if you think about the privacy implications, if you think about tracking, if you think about, and like I want to be on the side of good, not evil. So it's like I want to get in here and be like, shape this stuff rather than kind of other people getting in there and shaping it to be like, we're going to track everything and sell data to like, the government.
So that's actually a really great segue to a question that we've got from Liam Potter from UE Tech People. He's asking, buy now, pay later is a really volatile industry currently due to regulatory changes, as well as the entry of incumbents like PayPal and CBA via Klarna. What's your take on what the BNPL space will look like in 2025, and where do you think Zip fits into that? So you've touched on that broadly in terms of a vision for the company. What sort of things do you see happening within the future that's going to be tech enabled in this space?
I mean, everyone's going to jump onto it. Like that's without a doubt. Like since I've started there, I only started there in January, and we get new competitors launching every month or two, and it's like, so the concept is here to stay 100% because it's a great concept. I kind of feel like so when I was at Virgin, we launched the Virgin credit card, and it was the very first. It seems so like basic now, but it was the very first low cost low interest rate, no annual fee credit card, because before that it was always like these sky high interest rates. And we got a head start, and people just flocked to us because it was like this very new thing. And it became, within kind of 2 years of launching, it became this price war where it was like, well, we'll drop our interest rate. Well, we'll drop our interest rate. And it's kind of this race to the bottom. And then we were like, okay, well, let's look at new products, because the credit card, like, we've done what we wanted to do in the market here. What else are we going to do? What else can we disrupt? And I kind of feel like it's going to be the same thing, in that buy now, pay later is here to stay. All of the banks are jumping on it. The big incumbents are jumping on it, which is great validation. Like, the idea is here. Now it becomes, well, what do we do with it? Like, for us, we're very kind of focused on our users and the way that they spend money. I'm loving doing research into how people will be thinking about their finances 5 years from now, because coronavirus, I tell you, like, as of March, everything changed for our kind of product strategy, because we started off in January with this particular way of doing things. And as of March, it's like, okay, the whole world has changed. We've got to kind of pivot around that. And so that's been a really kind of fun time. So as far as kind of 2025, I have no idea, but we're experimenting along the way.
Yeah, we actually had to use cash the other day, and it was a very strange experience.
I went up to the Blue
I'm
Mountains
just gonna.
last weekend, and there was a bunch of places that didn't take card, and I was like, I got nothing, and I don't have a card with me. It's crazy.
It's a real limiting factor now, and I think when you look at, I was in Sweden last year, and they just don't take cash anywhere. It's a cashless society, and it's really interesting to see how COVID's going to impact that more broadly across the world.
Well, especially given China's just launched their digital yuan, right? And where they go, lots of us are going to follow. So, it's just such an interesting time to be in finance.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a bunch of questions for emerging entrepreneurs. Many of them are from students at Deakin University and University of Newcastle and Macquarie University. They're asking some really great questions. So two are kind of interrelated. One is from a law student, Bridget Lawrence. Another one is from another student doing a business degree at Macquarie called Yamin Tu. And they're both asking, they're interested in tech, but they're studying this other degree. What tech skills should I use to complement my studies, and what startups in the tech industry looking for with people with these kind of adjacent degrees?
So, I mean, I'm a product person, and generally people come into product from kind of tech or UX. I know we definitely look for people who aren't necessarily technical, but can speak to developers, can speak to engineers who understand how the technology works. Because when you understand how pieces kind of fit together, you can make better decisions. And you're not just kind of saying, that's an engineering decision, I have no idea about it. So I think the more you know about technology, like even if you kind of learn to code and then not to become a coder, but just to understand how the pieces fit together, I think that's really vital.
How would how would someone understand the process that it takes to actually build a tech product? Like, is there I could go to? Is there, online tutorials? So if I'm, say I'm a startup founder, I'm an emerging entrepreneur, I've got an idea, but I know zero about building an app or a web platform. Where do I go to just get some intel on first steps?
So it's funny, there's over the last couple of years, there's been this explosion in no-code platforms. And we experimented a lot with them at Blue Chili, because it's like, you shouldn't need to code to actually be able to validate your idea, right? It's about getting some prototype out there. There's some great platforms, even for creating mobile apps, right? Where it's like, you don't need to know how to code. You do need a little bit of kind of technical understanding, because they're called no code, but they're not just like drag and drop. You do have to understand how things kind of fit together, or how to do kind of certain settings. So, I mean, that's a kind of great place to start. I think there's one called Bubble that we used quite a bit. So I would just kind of go off and Google no-code platform. I mean, learning HTML is just the easiest language. It's something you can do from your bedroom. There's so many tutorials over there. So I would just kind of start with, a very quick hello world, like, start creating a page for yourself, and don't rely on, the other platforms that are out there. Just start learning HTML. It's really easy. I mean, people say it's not even a language, but it's just one of the easiest things to learn.
That's great advice. Um, can you give a short overview of how you go about translating an idea into product? I guess it's kind of related to what we were just talking about, but if you know, you're coming up with a basic concept to solve a problem, you're just not sure exactly how it's going to look technically as an app, for example. What
Mm.
would be a really quick and fast way to just kind of map that process out?
I guess it's thinking like, is it even an app? So if you think about what the user's pain point is, how is technology going to solve it? And so one of the examples we worked on at Blue Chili was a woman called Rebecca from Trio. And she came in and she was trying to solve the problem of women on maternity leave, returning from maternity leave, 50% of them leave in the first year because coming back to work is like not a great experience for them. So she wanted to have basically like a corporate portal where HR could upload all of the documents and policies and procedures, and you could talk about what having a baby is like, and you could have like education for the managers and blah blah blah. And I kind of heard it, and I was like, oh, like I don't really want to work on that. Doesn't sound very exciting. But then when we actually uncovered the problems, we went and spoke to, so many users, women who had returned from maternity leave, people who were managing people on maternity leave. We actually realized the pain point was not not necessarily that it was a bad experience coming back. The thing that we could work with technology was that your experience returning from maternity leave was entirely dependent on your direct manager. So the second we heard that, I was like, okay, that is an insight we can use, because we can use technology to actually spread that load out to the rest of the team. And the problem for a lot of women where they were very disconnected when they came back, no one had been in touch with them for a year. They came back, everything had changed. So we just started with a Slack bot because for us, that was the easiest thing to build. And we were like, what if we actually ping everybody kind of that this person is close to in the company once a month, and we're like, hey, have you got Shez is on maternity leave? What happened this month that you should tell her? Any gossip, any news, any changes? And they would just kind of reply to Slack. We would collate that into an email, send it to the person on maternity leave, and they could stay in touch with this kind of personalized digest, but without it being the direct manager kind of having to reach out. So I guess it's kind of looking at the problem and where technology can fit in, because to me, technology was not going to solve the fact that coming back from maternity leave is a hideous experience and society's not ready. And I kind of looked at all of this stuff. It's like, okay, we're not going to solve society, but we can solve this one part of people aren't getting contacted and it's all up to their direct manager. Like that's what tech can solve. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but it's kind of looking at what problems technology can fit in and then what that needs to look like.
No, I think that's a really great example. That question was from Kieran Egan, who's a university student, and I think you've raised some really great points there. So really having a lot of conversations with people who have the problem or you think have the problem to kind of validate those assumptions and really
you should be speaking to at least 100 of your users before you even pick up a line of code. Like you shouldn't even think about what you're building. And that's the thing with Blue Chili. Like everybody came in with a solution in mind. They're like, we're going to have an app that connects people in your neighborhood and you can tell them when you need babysitting and da, 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 da. And it's like, what's the problem that we're solving here? Like so everyone comes in very, they're in love with the solution, but you need to go back to the problem and talk to at least 100 of your users and figure out, is the problem you're solving your problem? Is it everybody's problem? How big a pain point is it? How painful is it? Because there were some cases that we were like, look, we spoke to 100 people. All of them have this problem. But it's a very minor problem for them. They're not going to spend money to fix it. It's just an annoyance for them. And you could build out this product and you could spend years of your life on it, but people aren't going to spend any money on it because it's just not that big a pain point.
That's great advice. We've got another question here from Kirsty Eager. She's asking, is there any specific part of the startup process that you've observed as the make or break for entrepreneurs? And maybe we just touched on it a little bit.
Look, it's about what happens when things get hard, because when you're in kind of building mode and everything's very exciting, it's very easy to be passionate and very driven. Like every entrepreneur goes through this kind of pit of despair at some point. And in my mind, like, you need to be really passionate about solving the problem to get through it, because it's going to get hard. You're going to, especially if you're a solo founder, or, you've kind of thrown all in on, like, I've been there where you've thrown all in on this and you're like, I'm broke, I'm not earning any money, I'm working 100 hours a week. Like, what am I even doing here? And it's kind of at that first hurdle, a lot of people do just go, oh, you know what, this is too hard. Like, I'm going to go back to corporate. This is never going to work. There's always kind of reasons why. So it is kind of getting through that first hurdle, or really kind of understanding this is going to be a hard journey. Like, startup founder sounds glamorous. It's not. Like, you're eating ramen, you aren't socializing with your friends, you're broke, you're putting all of your energy into this thing that you don't even know if it's going to go anywhere or not. It's going to be hard. So I think it's kind of just, it's not necessarily any one step, but it is just the kind of realization of, this is not just 3 months and I'm going to become a unicorn and the billions are going to come rolling in. Like, I'm probably going to be broke for a really long time. Sorry, they've just started.
Yeah, it's like the apprenticeship. It's like the apprenticeship of the 21st century, isn't it? The broke student just learning the tools of the trade. We've got a good follow-on question here from Will Rivkin from the Hunter Research Foundation Centre. He's asking, what advice do you offer entrepreneurs so that they get the most out of their experience with a startup that's likely to fail or has failed?
Oh gosh, I've learned more from my failures than I've learned from my successes. I mean, it is all about kind of recognizing, in my mind, like, why is it failing? What's happening? Is it that what you're building isn't resonating with people? Do you have an opportunity to pivot? Like, do you have an opportunity to say, look, we know the problem space is there. This solution maybe isn't kind of meeting the needs. And really kind of drilling down on maybe what, if this isn't working, what else could be working? It's probably finding out other ways of experimentation as well. Like, there's so many ways these days that we can do experiments that aren't actually creating code. It's like, put an ad on Facebook and see who's clicking on it. So it really is just kind of getting the most out of every experience. So even if you're not going to become a unicorn, like, our startup in Seattle, we kind of kept it going for a lot of years, just kind of not breaking even, but we were definitely not on track to be a unicorn, but we got so much out of it that it was like, this was just such a great experience for us.
So what do you see as some of the biggest opportunities in startups right now, specifically tech startups? This is a question from Raylene Bock.
Oh goodness, well, everything right now specifically, like, it's the best time ever to be working in startups, right? The entire world has changed. Everybody is ripe for disruption. Everybody is open to change. Right now, you could create a startup and fail so hard and nobody would notice, because the world is changing so quickly, it kind of doesn't matter. So it's taken away that idea of, oh my God, I'm going to fail and everyone's going to laugh at me. Like, right now, nobody knows. Like, the big companies don't know, the small companies don't know, the government doesn't know. We don't know what the world is going to look like by December of this year. So, like, what a time to really get out there and solve a problem, right?
And there's so many of them, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, there's so many problems.
So this is a question from Sojana Sujuru. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. Of the startups you've worked with over the years, how many have been successful businesses?
So I've been part of, Aussie Mail ended up sending, not that was my company, that was Malcolm Turnbull's company. So, I've been kind of part of startups that have gone crazy big. So, I've kind of been employee number 5 of companies that have gone to, 300. My own startups haven't quite hit that unicorn status yet. I'm still kind of playing around with a couple of ideas. A lot of blue chili startups, we were super early stage. So we're just kind of starting to see them get a lot of traction now. But, we took in people who were idea stage. They're like, I want to develop a way to teach kids how to do speech therapy in their home in a fun way. Like, that was the idea. And they're now coming out now. It's like, okay, they've got a product in market, they're selling, they're talking to big toy makers. So it does take a really long time. So of the blue chili ones, we had a handful of like crazy, amazing ones that are going to go really far. And some of the others, it's like, well, let's see.
Yeah. It can be a mixed bag, can't it?
Mm. And definitely the
Um,
difference between bootstrapping and VC funding makes a huge
mm,
difference. Like in Seattle, in Pinch Zoom, we were pretty adamant we didn't want funding. The My co-founder was very, very kind of against funding, so we bootstrapped the whole way. And so there's a very big difference that you can have in growth when you're kind of starting with a 100K base rather than a 10 million base. Just the
mm.
scale is just so different that you're never going to reach those heights, or very rarely going to reach those heights when you're bootstrapping.
Yeah, it's that risk versus reward kind of thing, I guess, where you take on the funding, you've got to deal with the all of the many challenges of scaling, but
Mm-hmm.
the reward that that brings, right? So, do you see a difference in types of startup founders who choose to bootstrap over funding, um, regardless of their product? Like, do you think it comes down to a personality thing, or is it more around the product?
It's probably location as well. Like in America, honestly,
Interesting.
you go through an accelerator, and by the first demo day, you've got investors lining up to throw money at you. They're like, "Oh, you've got an idea? Like, oh my God, take my money. Here's $5 million. Let me be part of it." And Australia is such a smaller industry, and we're so much more risk averse, where investors are like, show me traction, show me this. And then you come back and show them traction. Well, I'd like to see a little more before I choose to invest. So I think in Australia, we do have to bootstrap a lot more than we do in America. I think in America, it's like if you bootstrap, you're probably quite unusual. Or your idea is like so out there that investors just kind of don't want a part of you. Um, but
How
yeah,
do
I'd
you think
probably
that
say,
impacts then, particularly tech startups in Australia?
I mean, I think there's a lot of tech startups here that could have made it that don't, because they just don't get the funding in time. They run at it for 2 years, they run out of money, they just can't quite get to the next step, and then they give up. And I know quite a few of them where it's like, God, you guys should have been as big as, Google, or you
Mm,
should have been as big as Basecamp, and we just kind of didn't have the funding here. So I think we've definitely lost a lot of potential great ideas, and there's probably some brilliant people who are working in corporate here, kind of trying to save up for their next idea.
mm,
And equally, kind of in America, where there's money everywhere, there's so much shit that gets developed that it's like, oh my God, they gave you $5 million for that? Are you kidding me? So yeah, it's kind of, yeah, they've got a lot of false negatives in America, and we lose a lot of the kind of positives here.
it's interesting. I've got a question here from the Q&A. Jay Burgess has asked, thanks, Cheryl, that was great. I'm wondering, for the products, did you patent them as well, or was that less of a concern and focused rather on being the first out?
So I've worked on one product that was patented, and a couple of the ones through Blue Chili did. I mean, in my mind, it's about get it out there, get it tested. And it's funny, one of the first things everybody always says, because we're like, just experiment, put it out there, do a
Mm,
fake door, or do a concierge, start to get the learnings. And everybody's always so worried, like, what if somebody comes and copies this? And I kind of think, like, if your idea is that copyable, you probably need to drill down a little bit digger and bring the one thing that you can bring to it that other people can't.
mm,
So I've never kind of gone down the patent route, but at the same time, like, I'm not really working in like nanotechnology or anything like that. Like, I'm working in startups that are about kind of connecting people and their marketplaces, and they're kind of finding a little niche that way. But if I was, creating hyperlinks for the first time or something like that, then yeah, I'd probably patent that, because make big money, right?
I've got a question here from Adrian at Flinders. Cheryl, with competitors appearing on the daily for you, how does Zipco look to stay ahead? What after the Visa collaboration? What's next?
Oh, I can't say what is next, but I can tell you we've got a
Damn.
very, very smart product team, like all with hundreds of ideas in our heads, and we're running constant experiments. Like, we've got like 100 experiments at any one time going. Like, yeah, we're working on it. I'm personally not that worried about the competition. Like, it's funny, there's been so many that have launched lately, and all of them have their own great niche. Like, the banks have got their niche, they're looking at retaining their own users, so they're not coming to us. PayPal is doing it, they've got their own niche. Nobody has come up with anything yet that has terrified me. Like, if somebody came out with something where I'm like, oh god damn it, I wish I'd thought of that and I hadn't, then I'd be like, oh, okay. Nobody has yet, which puts us in a good place, right? Because we've got lots and lots of ideas and lots of whiteboard sessions and lots of experiments and lots of prototypes
Awesome.
too.
That's exciting. I've got another question here from Liam Potter. Newcastle's got a great startup ecosystem, but as a region, we haven't built something the size of success of something like Zip or Canva, etc. What's the missing piece?
Population. I mean, I loved my time in Newcastle, and what you guys are doing with I2N, and there is such a great, passionate, culture up in Newcastle, but it's just size. It's like if you wanted to all of a sudden hire 300 developers, where do you do that? You have to do that in Sydney or Melbourne or go fully remote. So I think it is just population for now. And it also is like either a kind of a seed of a company growing big, but I think it kind of has to be like a scale up coming in there going, we're going to plant ourselves in Newcastle and we're just going to be, huge up here. So I think it is just population and kind of funding.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. The density issues real in regions, and we're lucky. We are kind of like a Goldilocks city. We're not too big, we're not too small. We're not like super regional. And I guess the coronavirus has actually had a really interesting
I was
impact
just
for
about to say
us.
that might change things because all of a
Yeah, I mean,
sudden everybody's like, why am I living in Sydney?
absolutely. We're getting inquiries daily from people who are saying, hey, I've got some family connection to Newcastle and I'm thinking about moving back. What's it like up there right now? So, yeah, hopefully that might have some kind of
Hopefully that might
influence
change
for us
things.
in that space. Yeah. We've got another question here from A Mite who's asking what sort of skills are tech startups looking for in their first few hires? So if you think about you and your role in product at Zipco, what are you looking for in first hires?
I mean, we're kind of bigger now, so we're a bigger, more established product team. So what we would be looking for would
Mm,
be very different to what we'd be looking for in an early stage startup. I mean, I think in super early stage, you'd be looking for generalists. So you'd be looking for designers who could code. You'd be looking for product people who know enough about technology or enough about marketing. So you really kind of want those generalists who can come in and kind of jump on things as they happen. As you kind of grow to like kind of 15, 20 people, sorry, they're drilling again. That's where I think you start to get your more specialists where it's like, oh, okay, well now we need, a CTO who can kind of start to do this. So we need, very specific roles. But I'd say definitely in early stage, just get as varied as experience as you can. So if you're in engineering, learn a little bit about product. If you're a designer, learn how to code. If you're a product person, learn how to code or learn how to design. So just kind of try and round out your skills as much as you can because, yeah, for early stage, you're going to be doing a bit of everything.
we've got a question here from Pete at Zip. How long do your experiments run and how many people are involved?
It depends. So I just killed off an experiment a little while ago. So we ran it for about a month. It got a slight change, but it wasn't. I was looking for like my metrics were like I need this really, really kind of big change to see this, and it got like a 4% uplift. I was like, okay, kill it. It's not doing what I want it to do. But it really depends. So if we're looking at stuff that kind of changes behavior, you have to run that for, kind of 4 or 5 months to see, well, we had this experiment, but then what was the ongoing behavior after this experience? So if it's we wonder if people will click on this and be interested in this particular thing, like you can run that for a month and get enough data to know kind of go or no go. But yeah, the behavioral stuff you kind of need long term to see, well, they did this one thing. Did they go on? My hypothesis is they're going to go on to do this and this and this. Did they do that kind of versus the control group? Yes or no? And if it wasn't, what was the behavior and what can we learn from that? So yeah, you kind of a good couple of months for stuff like that.
We've got a question here from Emma Guthrie who's asking, when you need help or advice on something, who do you reach out to? Are these formal or informal relationships?
So my CPO is absolutely amazing. He knows like everything there is to know about product. So he's probably my first port of call. I've also got my kind of former CPO and my former product team from Blue Chili. We've still got our own Slack group, so they're well, it depends. Sometimes I go to them first, actually. So kind of I've got a bunch of product people around me that, I've worked with before, and we trust each other, and we can be really vulnerable with each other. Because that is the thing about kind of asking for help. You're saying, I don't know the answer to this. So you've got to kind of have a certain relationship with people. So the former product managers I've worked with and my former CPO, we worked with each other so intensely, and we know that we don't all have the answers, but we've all got very different perspectives. So I probably go to them first and then my CPO next.
Cheryl, we're going to have to wrap it up there. I can't believe how quickly that time went. It's always so awesome to catch up with you. I wish you were still in Newey, but I'm glad you found a really happy home at Zipco. And hopefully we'll be able to welcome you back again sometime soon in the future. Remote working. Yes, you can do
it. I would love that. Thanks so much,
But
Siobhan.
thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to flip over a couple of messages that we've got from the I2N. Hopefully our deck will come back up. But we've got another Startup Stories coming up shortly. They usually happen on the first Wednesday of every month. We've done a couple of special Startup Stories as a result of Spark Festival, which we've really enjoyed. But the next one is on the first Wednesday of next month in November. It's with Jeremy Gupta, who's previously from Car Sales, and he's now moved to Newcastle from Sydney and started up a new company. So we can share some details of that. And we also have our pre-accelerator program, which is called Validator. We have a showcase coming up of the 9 teams that have been through that. It's the first time we run this particular program. So we're really excited to see what the results are. And it's an interesting cohort. We have a mix of research teams, pre-startup teams, and industry teams that are developing out new products and services. So a real great variety of different offerings there. That Validator showcase is on the 5th of November, and you can find it on Eventbrite. Once again, love to Maxine and the team at Spark Festival for the incredible job that they're doing delivering Spark Festival digitally this year. I love that you can just dip in and out throughout the day and grab some really fantastic insights from all the events that are on, as well as the workshops too. Don't miss out on those. They've been awesome. So thanks again, Cheryl. Have a great day. And it was great to catch up with you again. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Siobhan.